Hi, my name is Natalie Castro, and I'm going to be talking about Chapter 4, Sociological Perspectives on Personality. So first I'm going to start with 3 analytical approaches, which are the societal influences on an individual, the individual influences on society, and the mutual influence between society and the individual. So, models of society, there are 3 sociological perspectives. They would be the consensus, the conflict, and the interaction. So, neither society is free of conflict, nor is there one that's predominantly conflict-oriented. All societies contain aspects of both. The interaction perspective views society as an ongoing process of human interaction. So one's influence then depends on individuals' subjective interpretation of the meaning of structure, and social structure does not exist on its own, nor does the self. So therefore they are interdependent and cannot exist without the other. So Durkheim's anime theory is basically, it talks about how society is structured as a system composed of many different parts that serve specific functions in order for society to survive and to just have maintenance for the whole. So just basically it's basically so that the society can function as a whole. He also talks about social causes, which he defines as egotistic, altruistic, anomic, and fatalistic. Egotistic occurs among individuals who lack close social attachment and meaningful interaction with others. Altruistic, there's 3 different categories that he describes, but it's basically defined as the opposite of egotistic because this individual has excessively high social interaction and integration. We have anomic, which occurs under a social condition in which regulations of individuals by society are weakened due to sudden social change. So, for example, they give norm ambiguity in society, which is basically a lack of rules or laws. It gives a fact saying that divorced men are actually more vulnerable to anomic suicide than divorced women. And then lastly, we have fatalistic, which is opposite of anomic because it occurs among individuals who experience excessive social regulation. So, for example, like in the prison system, or people who are enslaved, or women who can't bear children, etc. So now we'll go to Merton's typology of individual adaptation. He basically pretty much continues Durkheim's anime theory of suicide, and he focuses on the relationships of culturally defined goals and institutionalized means to attain these goals. So he has defined 4 alternative modes of behavior, which are conformity, innovation, ritualism, retreatism, and rebellion. And then for Parsons' general theory of social action and the personality system, he believes that there are 3 interrelated systems, which would be the social systems, personality systems, and culture systems. Social would include like organized about the relations of the actors to each other. Personality systems would be motivated by action organized about the individual actor. And then cultural would be like symbolic patterns created by the individual actor, which are then transmitted among the social system and personality system. He also goes to explain pattern variables, which he believes there are 3 or 4 different types. He names them effective neutrality, universalism, particularism, diffuseness, and specificity, and achievement and aspiration. Parsons' perspective is that each individual is a passive actor who needs depositions, whose need depositions are largely determined by the dominant pattern or value orientations within society and culture. So then we have Riesman's 3 character types. So basically he studied the changing American character in the terms of mode of conformity. He believes characters types correspond to social change, so therefore social growth or decline. He says that the society of high growth tends to develop a social character among the members whose mode of conformity is usually traditionally directed, meaning that their behavior is guided by a more traditional standpoint. So transitional growth is when a society has high birth rates and declining death rates. So this usually creates an inner-directed social character, which is influenced by elders early in age and directed towards generalized destined goals. And then we have demographic society, which just means low birth rates and low death rates. This creates the other directed character, which is not controlled by an internal gyroscope and are influenced by incoming signals sent by others, so they tend to follow the crowd. And then we have functionalist traditions, which tend to overemphasize the function of individuals as they conform to cultural norms, so therefore goals versus mean. And then we have the Marxian theory of social class, social consciousness, and alienation. Marx believes that human history means a history of class struggle. He defines class position as one's relationship to the means of production. He defines class consciousness as becoming aware of their own class interests. And he also states that capitalists develop the bourgeoisie ideology to justify their position and maintain the status quo that continues to serve their collective interests. This creates a false consciousness that this ideology represents the interests of all classes, which isn't true. Thus, it legitimizes and perpetrates their exploitation of the working class, keeping them from achieving their true class interests and collective destiny. So he says that true consciousness is the desire for abolition of capitalism, and he says that the theory of alienation is the estranged human conditions of the working class under capitalist systems of production. So then we'll go to class and socialization. Melvin Kahn's Melvin Kahn's goal was to examine the influence of social class position on parental values and how this affects the values and behaviors in respect to child socialization. So basically how our parents socialize us into having the same beliefs and value systems as they do. He believes that members of different social classes develop different social realities, such as hopes, fears, and aspirations. This in turn will influence our social behavior and how we're socialized as children into adulthood. And then we'll move to class and mental health with Melvin Siemens, 5 alternative meanings of alienation. He defines powerlessness as there's nothing much I can do about most of the important problems that we face today. Meaninglessness, which are things have become so complicated in the world today that I really don't understand what's going on. Normlessness, which is in order to get ahead in the world today, we are almost forced to do something that is not right. Cultural estrangement, which is I am not interested in TV programs, movies, and magazines that most people seem to like. Social estrangement, which is I often feel lonely. And estrangement from work, which is I don't really enjoy most of the work that I do. I feel that I must do it in order to have the things I want and need. So Simmel's legacy of social ambivalence, the marginal personality. He views class culture or class conflict as many different forms of human conflict and ambivalence embedded in social life. Parks explains the marginal man, which is one who has internalized the norms of a particular group but is not completely recognized by others as being a legitimate member of that group. And Kirchhoff and McCormick hypothesize that given the knowledge of that, one could predict which segments of the marginal group will exhibit the highest incident of marginal personality characteristics. So meaning the group status, the individual group identification, and the degree of rejection experienced by the individuals and the group as a whole. Weber's legacy. 1, status, inconsistency, and personality. He believes in addition to class, status, and party constitutes for structural domination. Wealth, social honor, and political power are interrelated. In his second legacy, rationalization, depersonalization, and commitment, Weber disagrees with Marx as he believes that all modern bureaucracies operate on the principle of goal-oriented rationalization that comes with depersonalization and oppressive routines. And this goes to Charles Rich, the Greening of America. He believed that he can explain the nature of the American crisis in the 60s, which he later believed that it was caused by disorder, corruption, war, poverty, uncontrolled technology, destruction of the environment, decline of democracy, liberty, and powerlessness, and also an absence of community and a loss of self. And then interactionalist perspectives on personality. Personality is considered the dependent variable of social structure. Koser explains how Simmel believes that socialization within individuals always remains in a dual relation with society. Thus, the individual is at the same time within society as it is outside of it, so he exists for society as well as for himself. The symbolic interactionism perspective states that the subjective meaning of an actor later turns into symbolic interaction and then is determined as an ongoing process of modification and interpretation. So Mead, Mind, Self, and Society. Self and society, he believes, are twin-born, which means one cannot exist without the other. Self emerges through communication of individuals and groups. Society emerges through the patterning process of interaction between the individuals. Therefore, he believes that the behavior of an individual can be understood as the behavior of the whole group. He later begins to play with the subjective I and the objective me theory. The subjective I is the spontaneous self, and the objective me is the socially objective self, which means that it's concerned by the views of others. And he says that this could be performed by non-symbolic interaction, which means that human beings respond directly to one another, or also symbolic interactions, which means humans interpret each other's attitudes and acts based on the meaning of that particular interpretation. So he believes that there are many stages to that, which is pretty much like a role-taking process. And then William Thomas's social organization and social personality. He's known for his famous theorem, if men define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. In other words, one's subjective meaning of the objective reality ultimately defines one's behavior. Similar to Mead, Thomas focuses on the interaction between the individual and society. The main difference, however, is that Thomas took pains to analyze the interaction between social organization and social personality. Therefore, it is a macro social process, which also means social change. And he also says that there are 3 types of social personalities. One would be the Philistine, the Bohemian, and the creative man. And lastly, for me, Thomas and Beyond, it talks about how Blumer emphasizes that humans have the capacity to view themselves as objects and to insert any object into the interaction situation. So he has 2 modes of inquiry. One would be considered exploration and inspection. So that's pretty much it for chapter 4. If you look at the notes that I created, there are also page numbers for certain charts on several of the theorists. So if you need that information, you can go ahead and check out my notes.